In 1994, Rare Nintendo released Donkey Kong Country, which was a big project to compete with Sega as well as trying to revitalize one of Nintendo's oldest characters. And when it finally released, it received universal acclaim and was a big success. But Rare was not done yet because they have a hot brand new platformer franchise to work with. And then quite literally a year later, they would release Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Conquest. As the main goal of this game is them trying to expand concepts for the first game, as well as doing some very bold moves, like the main character in this game is Diddy Kong, as Donkey Kong himself is off the tables for this adventure. And despite how crazy that sounds, Donkey Kong Country 2 ended up being way better than the first game, which is honestly saying a lot because the first game was already really good. But Donkey Kong Country 2 single-handedly expanded on so many cool concepts and made them even better, to the point where I can safely say that this game is easily the most acclaimed game in the series. And as for my personal history of this game, I started playing through this game about 2019, I think. It was around the time when I was really invested in the Super Nintendo and all of its classic games. And one of the games I was able to pick up was Donkey Kong Country 2. Now, similar to what I said about Donkey Kong Country 1, I kinda sucked at it. But similar to that, I did get better and better in it, and the more I played it, the more I really enjoyed it. So I cannot wait to just ramble about this game, because there are so much things I want to talk about here. But with everything out of the way, let's get started. So the game takes place directly after Donkey Kong Country 1, as King K. Rool returns and he wants revenge after the first game. And so instead of just trying to steal the banana horde head on, K. Rool tried to go for a much more interesting route, as the reason why K. Rool lost the banana horde was because of Donkey Kong. And so for the plan, he decides to kidnap Donkey Kong and use him for ransom, as he was basically the only person that was capable of defending the entire island, and without them, well, they're basically screwed. And so Diddy Kong, alongside with his girlfriend Dixie Kong, decide to head off to Crocodile Island to save Donkey Kong. The story of this game, just like the first, is very straightforward, where it's basically kind of like a typical Mario plot where Mario needs to save Peach, albeit the stakes were a bit higher in this game because Diddy Kong is basically a rookie going through a dangerous task. But anyway, so for the gameplay. Now, Donkey Kong Country 2 follows up the very first one, but this time expands upon specifically Diddy Kong's movement. As for those who don't know, in the first game, Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong played a bit differently in terms of controls, as Diddy was a lot more faster and agile compared to Donkey Kong, who was much more stronger but a bit slower. And honestly, I'm very fine with that because there's just something very satisfying of Diddy Kong's movement in this game. Like when he picks up a barrel, which is a very nifty shield against enemies, as well as doing this very fun cart move, which similar to DK's role has good amount of hang time. Now replacing the big ape, we have Dixie Kong. Now she's about as nimble as Diddy in this game because they're practically the same height and such. Although, she is still a bit slower compared to Diddy, and when she tries to pick up an object, it's not as defensive compared to Diddy as he holds it in front of his face while Dixie holds it up in the air. But, to compensate, she does have this nifty ability where she's able to use her ponytail to basically glide across the area. Plus, since the two Kongs are basically the same size now, you can actually pick up one of the Kongs and throw them to different areas, which is very nifty for some of the platforming sections. Like, there's this one part where there's this hook you can climb on, so you either throw Diddy or Dixie, and bam, you're immediately up there. Just try to not be reckless with this, because you can easily lose your Kong with this. And keeping both Kongs is very important, because if you thought Donkey Kong Country 1 was very hard, Donkey Kong Country 2 notches up the difficulty tenfold. As since DK is out, they're mostly focusing on Diddy Kong's movement, a lot of the platforming here is a lot more tighter than DKC1. As there are so many different types of enemies in this game that are so much more aggressive. And the obstacles here feels a lot more arcadey compared to DKC1 with a lot more surreal areas. And along the way, you get to meet up with various Kong members. Funky Kong returns and he basically acts like the same thing in the first game where he helps you go through different worlds. But this time around, you have to pay him with these banana coins. Guess the economy was kind of fucked between these games. Doubly so when you try to save the game, because instead of Candy Kong, you meet up with Wrinkly Kong in this cute little college area. But at the very least, they don't really ask too much, they mostly ask for like 2 banana coins. Other than those two, there's Swinky Kong, who has a big game show, which is a very useful place to farm up lives. And then there's Cranky Kong, who is about as disgruntled as he was in the previous game. He has so much more remarks towards Diddy and Dixie, and my lord, some of these age poorly. But he's mostly here just to give out hints for the various bonus areas. Very useful when you're going to the various worlds of Crocodile Island, as this place is far more dangerous compared to DK Island. Like, the very first world in this game is Gameplank Galleon, which was the final boss area in DKC1, but now it's an entire world. But I like how despite you being on the pirate ship, you're still going through various unique different settings. Like, some of the levels, you're basically going across the pirate ship trying to take out the Kremlings. While other parts, it has a big focus on elevation as you're constantly climbing up ropes and such on these various poles. And then after this world, you're immediately thrown into a volcano area where you need to avoid the lava. But I think my favorite world in this game is easily Crazy Kremlin because you have different types of weird locations in them. Like in DKC1, a lot of the locations in there feel a lot more realistic. But in this world, you're immediately thrusted into a giant beehive, as you're constantly trying to avoid the dread zingers while platforming on honey. And just like in DKC1, the minecarts return, but this time around it's been converted into a giant roller coaster. And also, for each of these, they try to do something unique from one another. Like one of these is that you're going through a big race trying to get a special DK coin. There's one where you're traversing through a haunted mansion while trying to avoid the giant ghost. And this one where you're trying to find the barrel switch to open the door, otherwise you'll crash. See what I mean? Every level tries to be unique from one another, even if they share similar settings. Like the caves return in the first game, but this time around it's been converted to a giant crystallized mine, where it has a huge focus on elevation while trying to avoid the various Kremlings. There's these swamp sections where you need to platform across these giant crocodiles. The underwater section return, but this time around they have much more unique kind of gimmicks. Like this one level where the water constantly turns into lava, so you need these seals to constantly change it back. But I think the most popular levels in this game are easily with Bramble levels, because these levels have some of the most tight platforming sections in this entire game. Like there was this one level where it's basically a maze with these barrel cannons, and another one where you're constantly dodging projectiles like cannonballs and these hooks. And I really gotta say this, despite this game being a lot more harder compared to DKC1, I think because of that and because of all the tight platforming, I genuinely believe that I really love the level design in this game a lot more. Like, there are so many different types of goodies and secrets within these levels, it is honestly insane. Now, just like the first game, Donkey Kong Country 2 has a bunch of animal bodies you can ride on, and in some other cases, you actually transform into them because some of these levels are built around these little dudes. Like Remy the Rhino returns, and he basically functions the exact same as the first game, although this time he does have a brand new move where you can hold down the A button and then he can charge. Doubly so with Card in this case, where you can do the charge as well. Winky may be absent from this game, but Rumbly basically functions the same thing where you can basically jump in high places. Squawk's returned from the first game, although this time around he actually functions way differently because in the first game, he was only used for like one level where he pulls up a flashlight. But here, he allows Diddy and Dixie to fly across areas while trying to avoid the various enemies. And then there was Squitter, and I'll be honest, I was kind of freaked out when I first saw this thing. There's just something off about the face that kind of throws me off. But honestly, out of all the animal buddies here, this one is probably one of the most interesting one, because he's able to spit out some spider webs, which is very useful for projectiles, as well as making some platforms for hard to reach areas. Very useful if you're trying to get everything in this game. Because if you still think Donkey Kong Country 2 isn't that challenging, then the 100% criteria probably will. As just like in DKC1, there are collectibles everywhere. The Kong letters return in this game, and they basically have the same thing of you just getting extra lives. But they completely overhaul the bonus room this time around, as rather than being just a small area just to get like bananas or extra lives. But this time around, it's basically a mini challenge you have to go through. As here, you'll earn these special collectibles known as Krem coins. Now you find these bonus areas in these special bonus cannons or when secret passages that can be well hidden. So if you see something like a stray coin or a regular cannon, that means that there's a bonus nearby. Now going back to Cranky Kong, in this game he has a bit of a challenge for Diddy and Dixie, as throughout the levels he has hidden one special DK coin. And he wants the Kongs to collect them because if they do so, they'll be rewarded by being put in the video game Hall of Heroes. And I've gotta say, this area makes me laugh a bit because of the no hoper sign next to Sonic's shoes. But yeah, these DK coins are probably the most challenging things to find in this game. And even though what I said about these collectibles are very daunting, like halfway through the game I felt like I was missing some of these bonus areas, and luckily there was a way for you to tell which ones you missed. As if you collect everything, the level should have a DK coin and an exclamation point that tells you that you've completed everything. So even though collecting everything makes the game harder, it still feels very fair. Plus, the bonus rooms in this game are just in general way better than what was in DKC1. But speaking of which, the bosses also had a big improvement because in DKC1 they were mostly a complete joke. But in this game, they actually put up a good challenge and they actually feel like unique bosses instead of just like simple enemies that were just scaled up. Like, we have this cool giant bird pirate. There's this guy who is literally just a sentient sword. But I think the funniest thing is that you eventually do rematch with the pirate bird, but he's a ghost. And even K. Rool is a really good boss in this game, as he wields out his trusty blunderbuss, as you need to jam it with these giant cannonballs so it can blow up in his face. And I like how they amped up the fact how much of a troll K. Rool is. Like every time when he gets knocked out, it looks like you've defeated him, only for him to get back with DK looking so shocked. Ending things off with DK finally being free and gave K. Rool the uppercut of a lifetime, as K. Rool falls all the way down to Crocodile Island and gets eaten by a bunch of sharks. But that's not going to be the end of it because there's more to talk about, but for now, I just want to talk about the presentation in this game. As for a very late SNES game, this game looks really good. It's honestly crazy how well this game hold up, especially since it was a pre-rendered 3D game in the 90s. Like, all the environments in this game have so much good detail. Like in level 3 of this game, you can see the sun slowly set as you progress through the level. The crystal mine areas have this very good sheen to them. And even Kongs are really well animated. I especially love their idle animations. Like how Diddy does a small little juggling act, while Dixie, while clinging on to honey, she actually tries to eat some of it. And I especially love the animations where every time you clear a goal screen, the Kongs will do this cute little dance animations. And then there's the soundtrack, and my lord. Out of all the Donkey Kong games out there, this is easily my favorite soundtrack in the entire Donkey Kong series, as the music here just really nails the adventurous feel. From the creaking waters of Gameplay Galleon to the beautiful backgrounds of the carnival areas. But I think my favorite two music tracks in this game are easily Forest Interlude and Bramble Scramble. Like, if I'm thinking about Donkey Kong music, those two are the ones I think about a lot. Especially the latter one, because I mentioned before that the Bramble levels are probably the hardest parts of the game, but the music alone just makes these areas feel so heavenly. If you've been on YouTube for long enough, you might have heard something about the Internet Checkpoint, which is a simple video about the backgrounds in this level. But if you check the comment section, it's mostly people talking about their lives. In a way, it was kind of like a time capsule in a way for a lot of people, which is so cool to see. But anyway, so before we wrap things up, I think it's very appropriate to talk about the different ports of this game. Now, this game didn't get a Game Boy Color remake like Donkey Kong Country, but it did get a Donkey Kong Land version. Now again, this is technically not a port or anything. It shares a lot of elements from the Super Nintendo game, but this is a completely different game with different levels. And that's all I can really say about Donkey Kong Land, because it's just basically a Game Boy version of Donkey Kong Country 2. So if you're a big fan of Donkey Kong Country 2 and want more levels, then I'd say this is a decent way to try them out. Obviously, they're not going to be as good as Donkey Kong Country 2, but for what it is and for what it was at the time, yeah, it was pretty solid. But then there was the Game Boy Advance remake, now just to recite what I said in the last Donkey Kong video. So in 2002, the original Donkey Kong Country studio was bought out by Microsoft. But despite that, Rare was still allowed to cooperate with Nintendo, as long as it was exclusive to their handheld scenes because Xbox didn't have a portable console. And also, this was around the time when re-releasing Super Nintendo games on a portable console was very popular. Like, there were so many different SNES re-releases on the Game Boy Advance. And the entire Donkey Kong Country trilogy was one of them. And just like with DKC1 on Game Boy Advance, I'd say this is about as on par with the SNES games. There are some flaws, but I feel like some of the pros make up for it. For starters, I really love the new UI in this game, where you can shoot out Diddy or Dixie out of a cannon and into one of the sails. And just like in DKC1, they added a brand new opening cutscene to give you better context on what's going on in this game, with you actually seeing K. Rool kidnapping Donkey Kong while he's laying on the beach. And as for the gameplay, well, it's Donkey Kong Country 2, but on portable. It does have similar flaws with the GBA version of DKC1, like the graphics and audio not being as good as the SNES game, but it heavily makes up for it by having so much good quality of life improvements. Like being able to travel across different worlds as much as you please, as well as saving whenever you want. Plus, because of course they did, they even added a few new GBA minigames because they could. Although these aren't really that much to write home about, but they did change one big thing in some of the worlds where, once you get at the near end of World 6 in this game, you'll find a small level with Donkey Kong in it, where it looks like you were able to save him, only for him to be lifted up all the way up into the sky. But in the GBA version, there's actually a brand new boss, and holy shit, this thing's ugly. I get they're trying to replicate like the original SNES 3D model's art style, but this guy kind of looks like one of those action figures you would make stop motions out of. The boss fight itself is still pretty good, I cannot deny it, but man, the art style whiplash really took me. But to wrap things up, we have one more destination to go in Donkey Kong Country 2. So as I mentioned earlier, when you go through the bonus areas, you unlock these things called Creme Coins. While throughout the game, you'll find this giant guy named Kleba who's near a toll booth, who asks Diddy and Dixie for some Creme coins so they can access some bonus levels. And this right here is the actual final world in this game, the Lost Worlds, which is home to easily the hardest levels in this entire game, which is honestly saying a lot because Donkey Kong Country 2 is very hard. Like, my lord, there are so many different do or die scenarios, some very devilishly hidden bonus areas, which luckily there's only one for each level and they contain the DK coin. And all of this concludes with one big rematch against Captain K. Rool. And this guy is freaking relentless as he constantly shoots things out of his blunderbuster, which really tries to keep you on your toes, ending things off with you giving out one big final blow, as K. Rool falls directly into Crocodile Core. Concluding with Cranky Khan saying that he's actually impressed with Diddy because he was actually able to get to #1 in his video game heroes. And then finally we end things off with this beautiful cutscene, and honestly, after nearly 30 years, it honestly still holds up very well. I like how there's no music or anything, you just hear the wind while K. Rool's just laughing as he gets away. Out of any kind of Nintendo endings, this is definitely one of the most satisfying of them all. And that concludes Donkey Kong Country 2. And final verdict? Still really good. I may not have nostalgia for this game compared to other really good platformers out there, but I still really adore this game because it really clicks with me in a lot of ways. Because I'm just a really big fan of platformers where you just collect things, and this game truly scratches my itch. From the very good tight platforming to the well-crafted level design, this is easily one of my favorite platformers of all time, and definitely my favorite Donkey Kong game so far. Although it might have competition with Bonanza. Man, I cannot wait for that game. But if you're very curious of this game, I highly recommend trying it out. It's very easy to access this game thanks to the Nintendo Switch Online. As well as the other Donkey Kong Country games, you can basically play most of them right now on the NSO. As well as most other Donkey Kong Country games, I highly recommend trying all of them, they're really good. But that'll do for today, so thank you for watching and I'll see you later. Bye bye!